What clean?
Clean for what happening? Clean considering?
Mackenzie Nicole Cowell was born on April 1st, 1992. At the age of 17, she was living in Orondo, Washington, and was a senior at Wenatchee High School, where she was a member of the dance team. She was also enrolled in beauty school at the Academy of Hair Design, enjoyed modeling, and had high hopes of becoming a beautician. She was described as a kind and considerate young woman who was very serious about her future. While in class on February 9, 2010, at around 3 p.m., she told her beauty school classmates that she would be back in about 15 minutes. Her classmates assumed that she was leaving to go get coffee at her favorite place called Auto Mocha, which was only about a 5-minute drive away. Mackenzie was last spotted on surveillance video leaving the academy, but she would never return. After leaving, she went down to an alley, up a short set of steps, into a parking lot, and got in her 1999 Pontiac Grand Prix. Moments later, she pulled out of the parking lot and sent a quick text to her boyfriend, Joaquin Villasano, that read, "Hey, what's up?" This would be the last text she would ever send. That evening, she had dinner plans with her father, Reed, but when 5 p.m. rolled around and she hadn't arrived home, he started calling her phone. He was concerned because Mackenzie was always reliable and on time. His first call went straight to voicemail, so he kept calling. However, she never answered, and his concerns continued to grow. Once she missed her curfew, he decided it was time to report her missing. Officers and deputies began searching for her and learned that she wasn't with her boyfriend, she hadn't stopped in at her mother's house, and none of her friends had seen her since she left class earlier that day. At 8 p.m., a rancher called police to report that a red sedan had been abandoned near his driveway since around 7 p.m. It was determined to be Mackenzie's Grand Prix, but she was nowhere to be found. Investigators would find her purse still in the car, but her keys, cell phone, and debit card were all missing. The location of the car was about 40 miles from her home in Orondo and nowhere close to the route she would have normally traveled. Meanwhile, investigators sealed off the site and experts began examining the car for clues. A helicopter was also dispatched to search the area. A single set of footprints were found leading away from the car toward the road. Investigators issued search warrants for her phone records and social media accounts, and they also called in the FBI. 4 days later, Mackenzie's body was discovered on the bank of the Columbia River in an area known as the Crescent Bar, an area that was sometimes used as a party or hangout spot by young adults. She was found fully clothed with her feet in the water just 50 yards from an unoccupied home listed for sale at the time. A number of black trash bags and some duct tape were also found near the body. A knife was found at the crime scene, and it was stuck in a manner that showed that her killer tried to defile her body. An autopsy revealed that she had suffered blunt force trauma and was strangled to death, but there was no evidence that she had been sexually assaulted. Investigators would say that a tip led them to the spot where she was ultimately found. That same tip also led them to a few persons of interest. Among the first persons of interest interviewed was Mackenzie's boyfriend, Joaquin. He said he had not heard from her since she sent him the text as she was leaving school. Joaquin agreed to take a polygraph test, and when asked if he knew what happened to Mackenzie, it showed he was being deceptive. Regardless, he was quickly ruled out as a suspect because his alibi was airtight. Also questioned was Joey Fisher, the boyfriend of Mackenzie's mother, Wendy, because he and Mackenzie had gotten into an argument the day before, but police were able to quickly rule him out as well. A local college student and police informant named Liz Reed came to investigators with a bizarre story. Liz was a former drug dealer and Oxycontin addict who was known for forging prescriptions. So it's safe to say Liz had some credibility issues, but in her story, she was able to name names and included details that matched up with evidence investigators had not released to the public. Liz told them that two drug dealers, Sam Cuevas and Emmanuel Cerros, had mistaken Mackenzie for someone else they believed was an informant and a snitch and killed her for it. She had told investigators the two men had made a video of the murder and she was forced to watch it. She described that the men had strangled Mackenzie and also talked about a knife that matched the knife found at the scene. She also gave the location of the attack as a bluff that happened to overlook the Crescent Bar, the spot where Mackenzie's body was found. However, Liz would later say she lied about seeing a video of the murder. Investigators received permission to eavesdrop on the two men, and before long, they were brought in for questioning. But the police concluded that both men had an airtight alibi from the time of Mackenzie's disappearance until her body was discovered. Cell phone data also showed that both men were nowhere near the crime scene at any point. As for the supposed murder video, it has never been located and it's believed it doesn't actually exist. Investigators ultimately cleared the two men and went on with their investigation. When Liz later recanted her story, she would tell interviewers that she had done so because she was afraid that someone would suspect her in the case if she didn't. Later, Liz led police to a ring that she claimed came off Mackenzie's finger during the attack. However, her family told police they had never seen Mackenzie wearing it, but defense attorneys would later say that it was visible in a photo of her. But it didn't matter because both suspects had airtight alibis. 6 months after the murder, new developments would lead investigators away from Liz and the two men when they received a letter from Theo Keys. The letter told about a man by the name of Christopher Wilson, who Theo believed had likely killed Mackenzie. The letter also alleged that Chris was a student at the Academy of Hair Design and he and Mackenzie had been talking. Several other people came forward saying that Chris had an unhealthy fascination with death and serial killers and the TV show Dexter. He also had a tattoo of Hannibal Lecter on his arm from the movie The Silence of the Lambs. A classmate of Chris reported that he talked morbidly about his time working at a local mortuary. When Chris was brought in for questioning, he claimed that he really didn't know Mackenzie beyond attending the beauty school together. He said there had been no relationship between the two and volunteered to provide a DNA sample. Multiple swabs were taken and sent off to the State Patrol Crime Lab, and lo and behold, the DNA from the crime scene matched Chris's DNA. He quickly lawyered up and was placed under arrest and charged with second-degree murder. At the time of the murder, Chris was renting a small place at the Burke Hill Apartments, just 3 blocks away from the Hair Academy. Even though Chris had moved out of the apartment by the time of his arrest and it had been cleaned, investigators still decided to have the apartment checked for evidence. When forensic experts sprayed the main room with luminol, they could see a faint glow from a small patch of floor. A small carpet square was cut out and removed, revealing the padding underneath. That padding also had blood on it, and when tested, it matched Mackenzie's DNA. Mackenzie's cell phone data also showed that her phone had made and received transmissions between 3 and 3:42 p.m. on the day of her disappearance from that general location. At 3:42 p.m., Mackenzie's boyfriend Joaquin sent her a reply with the word, "Hey." This would be the last activity on her phone. Looking back at security footage around the time Mackenzie left the school, they learned several things. In one set of footage, a man resembling Chris can be seen leaving from a different exit and walking north up the alley in the direction that would lead him towards his home. This occurred only 1 minute after Mackenzie left. A minute later, Mackenzie's car can be seen driving west towards Chris's apartment. Meanwhile, 2 other people claiming to know Chris came forward and spoke with investigators. One of them was Shauna Novak, who said that she had been friends with Chris, and one evening at a party, he had come up behind her and started to strangle her until she nearly passed out. After he released her, he apologized, saying he hadn't meant to hurt her. Since that event happened before Mackenzie's disappearance, this led investigators to the idea that Chris may have been using different women as practice, with his ultimate goal being to kidnap and murder someone. This information would become part of the profile they were building on him. Investigators also received tips from 3 different witnesses who reported seeing a man matching Chris's description near where her car had been abandoned. Things would get even worse for Chris. As investigators went through his computer for evidence, they found searches about serial killers and posts on forums dedicated to the topic. An old girlfriend of Chris's named Tessa was also brought in for questioning. 2 videos found on her cell phone would become major evidence in the case. The first video, recorded on June 26, shows the 2 walking around in Chris's apartment and then moving aside a coffee table. The camera focuses on a patch of carpet with a large brown stain, which police said resembled old dried blood. Chris was hoping to get his security deposit back when he moved out and shot a different video on June 30th as proof. In the video, he can be seen asking Tessa if the apartment is clean, to which she strangely replies,
"Look clean?
Clean for what happening? Clean considering? Yeah, it's clean considering."
Photos on his computer showed Tessa posing on the apartment floor as if she were dead in the exact same spot as the brown stain. However, she claimed she had no knowledge of the blood stain when Chris told her to pose there. In order to explain away the blood, his defense attorney insinuated that Mackenzie's blood had been planted there by the police. At this point, 22-year-old Tessa was certainly becoming a person of interest in the case. Phone records show that she and Chris had spoken to each other at 3:32 p.m. on the day of Mackenzie's disappearance. While it wasn't unusual for the 2 to call each other, the timing of that particular call was just half an hour after both Chris and Mackenzie had left the academy separately. It was also strange that Chris had left class early the same day as Mackenzie. Records would show that he would contact Tessa 5 more times that evening and also borrow her car despite having a working car of his own. Sometime between then and being brought in for questioning, Chris sold his black 1991 Volkswagen, which was later found in a nearby city's impound lot. Phone records also showed that Tessa had called her current boyfriend around 9 p.m. on the night of the disappearance. She had asked him to pray for her because something bad had just happened. She and her boyfriend also just happened to live near the Crescent Bar. Tessa would later be arrested and charged with rendering criminal assistance to Chris in the murder of Mackenzie. Her white 1991 Subaru Legacy was impounded and searched for evidence. Swabs were taken from stains within the car, a knife was found under the seat, and 3 Camel cigarette butts were removed and tested against DNA found on a cigarette butt near Mackenzie's body. However, those test results returned inconclusive. His family has held on to these results as a sign of innocence. But inconclusive results don't necessarily mean Chris can be ruled out. Even without these results, investigators still had mounds of other physical and substantial evidence against Chris. But Chris continued to maintain his innocence and hired famous defense attorney John Henry Brown. Brown had made a name for himself by representing Ted Bundy and the barefoot bandit Colton Harris Moore. Brown had also successfully defended a number of people accused of abuse in what became known as the Wenatchee Witch Hunt. Brown also argued for and got approval from the judge to reintroduce Liz Reed's testimony. Chris's mother, Kathleen Sorens, tried covering for him by saying he was with her that afternoon picking up cupcakes for an upcoming event. However, in the end, Chris was offered a plea deal of 6.5 years and would be charged with first-degree manslaughter instead of second-degree murder. However, he refused the deal and maintained his plea of not guilty. Prosecutors would then remove that plea deal and add another that had more charges and a longer prison sentence. After the jury selection began, his attorney advised him to take the plea deal. Chris would then agree to plead guilty to 1 count of first-degree manslaughter, first-degree robbery for the theft of her phone and debit card, and second-degree assault for the choking of Shauna Novat. He was then sentenced to 14 years and 3 months in prison. Just under a year later, Chris attempted to withdraw his guilty plea, stating that he only accepted the plea agreement because he felt he would have not received a fair trial, but the motion was rejected. Chris will be eligible for parole this year. 10 years ago in 2013, Chris's loved ones created a petition online that read Christopher Wilson was wrongfully accused of Mackenzie Cowell's murder and railroaded into taking a plea deal for manslaughter. They believe that the DNA evidence found at the crime scene on cigarette butts, the murder weapon, Mackenzie's car came from at least 4 different males and that none of it matched Christopher's. However, we know that the DNA tests were inconclusive, not negative. They are also putting the blame on the 2 drug dealers that Liz Reed accused. However, they failed to explain why Mackenzie's DNA was found inside Chris's apartment and why his DNA was on duct tape found at the crime scene. Remember, when police originally questioned Chris, he claimed he didn't know Mackenzie very well at all. So why would her DNA be in his apartment? What are your thoughts? Do you agree with Chris's family and feel he was wrongly convicted? Or do you feel they have the right man behind bars? Let me know in the comments below.